going to be going through a new training manual that we just finished. And if you'd like a copy of that training manual, feel free to reach out, and I'll be glad to send it over to you. So when it comes to roadblocks for scheduling programs, there's really four big ones that I come across most often, right? One is systems and platforms. In other words, a lot of the scheduling groups or programs or departments in organizations, you have, some people using P6, some people using Microsoft Project, a lot of people use an Ask to Power project now. That's a great new tool. But you have all different kinds of not only software, but you have different platforms. Some is in the cloud, some is on desktop, some is on a local server. I know in our organization we have files everywhere because we are doing a lot of scheduling for clients, and so that dictates in a lot of cases. So that's a big roadblock to processing a good quality control, right? If I can't see that stuff. Processes are another big one, right? How often are you updating? What do you do with delays? Things like that. Visibility is another roadblock. Trying to get that scheduling program, or just schedule data out so that you can really make quick or have good, quick, visible information on the schedules. And then ease of use is another big factor. How easy is it going to be, especially for non-schedulers, maybe it's executives or operations managers, whatever. How easy is it to get that information? So we're going to be working with that today. We're going to really define the four objectives that I always look for in a good scheduling program. Quality control. How do you make sure the schedules that your project teams are putting together are good, they're reliable. Compliance, making sure their updating frequency and everything like that is going, is going as should be going. The third one is training and support, right? How do you know who needs training and on what? And then finally, reporting, being able to have that visibility that we talked about. So we're going to kind of be addressing all of those as we go through Schedule Validator. So I'm just going to jump right in. As I mentioned, I'm going to be kind of going through the manual that I have, although I'm going to be actually doing the work in the Schedule Validator page. So I've got a here is what, if you log into Schedule Validator and you have a project or two, this is something like what you would see. If you go into, I can select I have two projects in here. I have a sample project and I have city office building, right? So when you create an account for the first time, most of it pops up and it asks you, to create a project to start off with, and then it automatically asks you to download. But I'm going to step back a little bit as if you've already been logged in once and worked through that process. But if you want to create a project, setting up projects, this is your projects menu. It's very easy. I hit the plus sign here and I enter in all of my project details. And it's as simple as that. If I put in sample 2 project, right, and fill in the details, in my details there, and I create it, it's going to pop up and ask me, go ahead and start dragging some schedules in, but I'm not going to do that right now. But so that's where you start creating a project. We'll deal with that a little bit more later. The next process is starting to add schedules. So if I'm in a project and I want to add a schedule, it's very simple. I can go in here and just hit this little plus sign to add a schedule. This is a plus sign to add a schedule. Here is a minus sign to delete a schedule. And here's a minus or a little arrow to move a schedule to a different project, right? So to upload a schedule, I hit the plus sign, and that's going to give me, I can drag and drop multiple files in at one time, and it'll process them all fairly quickly. And once you do that, the first thing that pops up, here's one that I've already uploaded. I uploaded the schedule here that's about 28% complete. And the first thing I notice is my schedule validator score. And so I can click on that schedule validator score and I can see how the scoring occurred, right? This is how this explains, these narrative sections explain what you need to do to improve your score. It's very helpful if you're reviewing schedules. There is, some very, very good review comments. If you're trying to just put out a good quality product, this will help you or help your teams put a good schedule together, right? Some of the key components for quality control is the whole CPM, critical path method, making sure that good quality schedules are in place. Now, this is not only quality score, but it's also a risk score, right? There are some items in here that you get scored on, like percentage of activities on the critical path, right? If you have a high percentage, if you have a linear project, you're just going to have a high percentage of activities on a critical path. So it's not necessarily quality, but if you have a high percentage, that is a risk. So that also goes into the scoring. So we're not going to have a lot of time to go into detail in each one of these, but you can certainly find out more on our webpage on these reports. But anyway, so that. It's very simple. You upload a schedule, and there's your SV score. If you want to look at the details and really drill into what's going on, I go to my diagnostics dashboard. This diagnostics dashboard allows me to drill into schedule issues. I can click on here and it gives me the longest path down here, the critical path activities. I've got activities with no successors. I can see that. And one of the things that we talked about before is this works for my Microsoft project, P6, and Ask to Power project schedule. So I have one dashboard that kind of drills into all of that. Some of this information you can get in the software, but there's a lot of really cool items here. If schedulers are just letting, activities ride the data date, it's even got a function for that, just to be able to drill into those. So between those two reports right there, your schedule validation score and then your diagnostics dashboard, you have a very, very good tool to make sure that your schedule is in pretty good shape. If I go to my diagnostics dashboard, right, each one of these, like I said, I can pull up a mini report, a quick report here with that view button, or if I hit print, that report is it's gonna put a full narrative together on, my internet's going a little slow, but it'll put a full report together with all of the narratives on that. Feel free to reach out to me, by the way, if my screen freezes. Yeah, here's that schedule validator narrative. And this just shows all of the technical statistics on that schedule. And I can also share it if I want to by sending it via email. Now, all of these functions, these diagnostic scores can be customized, right? I can go into my project settings right here. There's a little sprocket next to this project and set up all of my settings. I can set the name, what type, I can readjust any of this new project stuff that I set up. And right down here under validation parameters, I can establish what the parameters are. Like some people, some of our users or some of our clients, they want to have an update every 2 weeks. So they set that, update for 2 weeks, or they'll set they don't want to have any duration over 10 days. They can customize all of that in here, and that all goes to your dashboard. So once you customize those parameters, now that doesn't customize the schedule validator score. The schedule validator score is the same across, that's a scoring system that you can't customize. But the diagnostics, internal diagnostics and scoring that you want to track, you can customize all of that. I want to just show you real quick. I can archive a project. I can take this project here in my settings. I can go into my settings and make it either an active, an inactive, or archive, right? So the difference is if it's an active project, it shows up on my project list, and inactive also shows on my project list. The only difference in those two is if I'm on an enterprise version, the inactive project doesn't show any, it doesn't send any information to the dashboard. So for example, if I'm working on an old claim, right, I'm doing some schedule analysis on an old claim, I'll mark it inactive so it doesn't put any of that information on our, our internal dashboard. And then archive allows me just to, save that for posterity's sake. And now when I save that, I have an option to hide those archived projects or turn them on as needed. Okay. Now let me just explain one thing pretty quick. You'll see I've got my city office building. I've got several updates. And as I upload more and more updates, you'll notice I'm getting my schedule validation score for each one. And these comparisons are comparing to the previous data date. So basically what happens, you have a schedule validator has a publish function. So if I have two schedules with the same data date or schedule date, it's going to unpublish the first one and publish the second one, right? So in other words, if it's got the same data date, it's not going to compare those two schedules. It's going to skip them. I can still have them in there, but it's looking from schedule to schedule. It's doing the scoring like we talked about, the score of that schedule. It's looking at finish date impacts. It's looking at critical path, Windows analysis. So between these two schedules, my critical path slipped 24 days, but my end date didn't slip. So that's telling me that schedule got manipulated a little bit to still show finishing on time. Plus I have an execution score. And my execution score is just a score that shows, I was planning on having our schedule showed 195 activities starting in the last, after the last update, and only 123 of those actually started. And then same thing with the finish. So that's an execution index, but these are all measuring from project to project. So that's kind of what the publishing means. It's going to, if it's got a separate data date, it's going to put them in order of their data date or status date, and then it's going to run all of those comparative analyses in between those. So each one of these has reports. We'll get into that in just a moment. Then let me just cover a couple of miscellaneous schedule adjustments that you can do. These are mostly over here in this little tool section, this action section. I can edit the name of a schedule if I want to come over here and edit. Now, if you're using Microsoft Project and you upload it, you can actually edit the schedule date. Microsoft Project, a lot of users don't use the status date. So the schedule doesn't know, Schedule Validator allows you to change that date without putting the status date in your schedule so that it'll run the analytics in between a couple of schedules. I also have the opportunity to download the native file, this little action button over here. So basically this serves, in our company, this serves as our repository for all the schedules. I mentioned earlier how we have schedules spread out all over the place. But because we use this tool to kind of manage our quality control and everybody's using it, we have a good repository for all of our schedules. So we can always download the native file from there. And then, once again, the key is to organize your schedules by project to keep things nice and organized. If I want to move a schedule from one project to the other, I just check it here, hit the arrow here, and move that over to the sample project. And now I have my schedules all organized, and I can actually, maintain some good function. Now, all of that I just showed you comes with just the basic essentials package, right? So that's all part of the free version of Enterprise. You can create an account, upload schedules, create as many projects as you want, upload as many schedules as you want. You get your scoring, you get all of these analysis, but you'll notice that you'll have an option to do the reporting tool, which is an add-on. So that's kind of the second step of quality control, is getting a good, getting good reporting. And so what this does, let me just cover reporting here for just a few minutes. I'm going to go through these really quick. But each one of these icons here, as you've seen, has a report associated with it. This activities added, right? This basically gives me my schedule comparison report. This looks at all of these two schedules and looks at what changed between those two schedules, right? Once again, this is automatically just doing the schedule before and after it. This one gives my start and finish comparison report, starting with the end date, but it goes through each activity where there was variances in the dates. Here's our critical path analysis. This shows that the critical path lost 24 days, but somehow the project end date didn't move. So that you can actually use this report to kind of find out what happened, what was resequenced, or what durations were cut. And then, as we mentioned, there's an execution report as well. Now, I can, if I want, I have a reports button here. So these are the quick reports, clicking on each one of these. But there is a reports menu here where I can get a lot of the same reports. For example, the comparison, the start comparison, the critical path analysis here, it's the same report that we just had here, but I can be a little more selective. If I've got 20 updates in my project, I can select these two and run a comparison for those two, right? So I can just click on that, compare the schedules, run a critical path analysis. There's a progress curve. There's a milestone comparison report. There's an execution, between those two schedules. So you can even do how are we doing since our baseline, right? I can select the baseline and the current schedule and run that execution report for that. There's also one of the new reports in Schedule Validator is a calendar analytics. So it'll go through and it'll actually show you where you have anomalies in your calendar. I know from our standpoint, that's the number one support issue that we have the number one support request that we have has to do with calendars. And then our trends reports, the trends report, I can select all the project schedules. I can select 20, 30 schedule updates and run a critical path trends report, for example. This one only have three schedules shown, but over a course period, I can see every time the end date slipped, what happened on the critical path from month to month. Those are some great reports too. Like I said, if you want to look at some of those reports or go through that, we typically have some training on how to read some of those, and that's basically how the reports. Those are pretty easy to operate. Let's finish up today. I want to take just a few minutes, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and talk about the enterprise and what makes it different. So we talked about earlier, you have the essentials package that has the SV score. In fact, you can go to the Schedule Validator website. There's a table there. You get the scoring, you get the diagnostics, all of that's free. The report add-on is $20 a month or $200 a year, kind of a thing. But the enterprise is what you can set up now that the schedulers in your organization are using this tool to manage their projects. There is the enterprise functionality. So I'm going to switch over to an enterprise user. So this is what it would look like once again from, here's an individual project for this user. Well, here's a project for this user. Here are my projects. And then here is my enterprise dashboard. So Down here are all of the projects in our organization, and I can look at these at any number of ways. But before we get into that, let me just show you how the enterprise is set up. It's very easy. A lot of you have already seen this, but let me just go through a couple of things. As an enterprise admin, I can log in and add the users, right? It's very simple. Just add users here. I create their role in the organization, who they report to, who reports to them. I come out of that with a, an org chart, very, very easy to set up. And so I have that ability to set that up. Now I can view my projects in any number of ways. I've got a hierarchical view, right? That's based on that org chart. Here I can drill down at a personal level. And I can also use the filters up in the top. For example, here are my enterprise stats. I've got my average score, SV score, for all of our schedules in our enterprise is 74. Our execution average is 54. Here's my team's stats, which in this case I'm the administrator, so I have, these are pretty much my stats. I've got 29 schedules in my team that are behind the ball curve on getting their update. They need an update. I can click on that button and it runs that filter for me, and I can see who is, which projects need an update. I can even send them a little email there, right? And turn that filter off. My stats, I've got one of my projects needs an update. And then here are all the stats that we've talked about. You've got your critical path slippage, right? I can run a filter here, and I can click on that, and it filters the 14 projects that the critical path slipped last month. I noticed out of those 14 that I ran, there's 4 of them that the finish date didn't slip. So I can click on that one, have a double filter there, and I can see, this gives me the questions I need to ask my team. It's like, hey, how did the critical path slip 24 days, but your end date gained 14 days? Let's see, let me go through, we talked about setting up the enterprise and the dashboard. One of the new features that we have now, I'm going to turn these filters off just by clicking on those again. I can go into a project and tag it. So I'm going to go into this project and I'm going to add a tag. So I can add a tag for California. Let's say this is a California project. So I add a tag to that project. So now I could go through and tag any projects any number of ways. I can set as many tags up as I want. I can do, set up however many I want and organize all my projects that way. And then I can actually filter that. I can look up, there's my California project, and then that immediately pulls that filter up for just those projects. So there's a lot of different ways to filter projects. I'm going to turn that filter off. Just one more thing I'll show you right quick on this page. I can also sort on any one of these columns, and I can find out which teams in my which project teams execute the best, right? In other words, which projects plan their work well and execute their plan the best. And so that by doing that, I can go in, click, go to that project and find, congratulate that team. A lot of these settings, or nearly all of these settings, can be customized here in my settings. I can set, how often I want updates done, what my alert status is for each one of these, and that's pretty much it. Now, just one last thing. If I want to, let's say in my enterprise, I've got one thing, managing users in my enterprise. I did want to cover that. If I want to go into my enterprise and I want to remove someone from my enterprise licenses. I can delete that user, right? What that's going to do is put all of that user's projects under the hierarchy, under the person that they report to, right? So what you may want to do is go into an individual user. I can drill down to the users here, and I can take those projects and I can reassign them to whomever else in my org chart, right? I can reassign those projects and just move them to another user in my organization and then delete it, right? So deleting a user from that enterprise table doesn't actually delete that user from Schedule Validator. It just removes them from the enterprise, and they basically go back to an essentials license. Let's see here. I'm going to jump right into questions. One question, I see a current weather box. Does it log basic weather stats each day? It does, and that is a new feature. And so that has not been, the weather log has not been rolled out, but yes, that is the weather log will keep track of certain times a day that you want to do that. But that actually is a new feature. It hasn't been rolled out yet. Let's see here. Are we able to, here's another, are we able to pull in projects and baselines via P6 web services? The only way to bring projects in, P6 schedules in, is using an XER file. So typically, here's several challenges with using P6. P6 using their database server, a lot of times you don't know which project is current, which ones are active, which ones are inactive, unless you have a very rigorous process management with your P6. So the workaround for that is, people upload their XER file, and then if they need to make corrections, they go back and make corrections, and they upload it again, right? And then they can delete the old one if they want, but it keeps track of that most current published schedule. So, that way the system knows, which schedules are actually the up-to-date one. Let's see, okay, I had a question. How can we validate schedules for multiple projects? Do we have to log in multiple times? That schedule may have come in early, but as you've seen, you can create projects, Schedule Validator. There's no limit on projects. You can create as many projects as you want. And you can also upload as many schedules as you want, right? So really the tool is free. What you're paying extra for are two things. One is if you want the advanced reports, or number two, if you want to go have that enterprise function. Is there provision? Another question, one more. Is there a provision to add a new schedule validation criteria? We can, the schedule validation score is set, right? That's a standard score, what we call a DCMA plus. If you're familiar with DCMA, they provided a lot of the guidelines, but the schedule validation score took those as a basis and added a bunch more stuff. A bunch more criteria. So that is set, but on the parameters for your diagnostics dashboard, you can set what your company standard is for a long duration, the amount of float you allow, those types of things. Okay, I'm going to call this a wrap. I do have a couple more questions, and I will try to answer those offline. But I wanted to try to keep this to 30 minutes. And so once again, I appreciate you attending today, and I will try to get these out to you. If you have any questions, feel free. I'll have some of these questions, and I'll respond back to those in addition. All right. If you'd like to, if you don't mind, there's a survey at the end. If you'd like to see more, feel free to reach out That's what we do. So thank you very much and hope you have a good day.